So, discrimination against overweight people is rife across British workplaces, according to a major new report looking at weight-based prejudice, or fattism, as it's known.
Well, the research reveals that more than 2/3 of employees believe that weight discrimination exists in their place of work, with nearly half of respondents considering it to be a problem.
So, Professor Binna Kandola is calling on more to be done after the weight discrimination at work reports findings. And Sarah Brocq, the founder of All About Obesity, started her organisation after being discriminated at work, and both join us now. Good morning, both. Sarah, if I can come to you, how does this sort of discrimination manifest itself in the workplace?
I can't hear anything.
Can you hear us, Sarah? Well, let's go to Professor Binna Kandola. Whether you can hear me, Professor. How does this sort of discrimination manifest itself in the workplace?
The biggest area actually is, this is particularly for people who are living with obesity, is actually assumptions being made about their character and their competences. So essentially being stereotyped as being lazy, lacking self-control, and then making the jump from those to being incompetent to be able to do the job.
OK, and so, but are people explicit about that then, would you say, Professor? Or is that something that people who are overweight are concluding by the way that they're treated? Because presumably most workplaces now, you can't obviously say outright to somebody, I think there is too much of you in the office, but it might be that it manifests itself in more subtle ways.
Yeah, actually, the interesting thing about weight discrimination, when you compare it to gender and race and disability, for example, they're covered by the legislation, and we are more careful about those things generally, which is a good thing. But with weight discrimination, people are they're happier to express their opinions and attitudes about this. And in the survey, and there were over 1,400 people who responded, in our survey, we found that something like 1 in 8 of people who were both living with obesity and underweight had said that they had experienced physical and verbal abuse. So it was actually quite explicit.
Gosh, it's sort of surprising in a way. Sarah, is that what you found in your experience, that people would actually say things?
Yeah, so I had an experience myself where I worked in sales, so quite obviously people-facing role, and I had asked for some feedback from a new boss around how he thought I was doing my job, and I literally got this. He basically said back to me, he said, well, actually, Sarah, looking the way that you do, trying to sell a diabetes drug, he said, I really didn't know how you were going to be very successful doing that. And I was a little bit like, okay. Not really sure what to do with that, because it was very blatant that he was basically saying the way that I looked was going to affect my ability to do my job. And yeah, at the time I was very much kind of, because I'd spent most of my life kind of shaming and feeling like a failure myself because of my weight, I didn't know how to respond, and I just kind of laughed it off. But now that I'm a lot more educated and understand obesity and the complexities, it would be something I would absolutely challenge now. But at that time, I was a bit like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
No, that does sound tough, but I suppose there are some situations where being overweight is not the same as being a different race or a different sexuality or a different gender. There are some jobs where being overweight would impede your ability to do that job, whether it be bungee jumping or sports instructing.
That is the case, yeah, I'm sure. You know.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry.
Go on, Sarah.
There will always be, I suppose, some jobs where, you know, there will be certain things that will exclude you from being able to do that job. But I don't think that that's just down to, you know, someone's body shape and size. It can be down to lots of things, can't it, around other jobs where people might not fit in because they're too short or they're too tall, or, you know, there's other factors to it. So, yes, you know, I think you're right in what you're saying. But I think most of the time, what we do is put this kind of blame and shame onto someone, that this is a choice, that their body shape is a choice, and that they've chosen to live like this. And what we actually now know is that obesity is not a choice. So actually what we're doing is kind of discriminating against someone that where actually lots of the reasons why they're in a bigger body are out of their control.
I wish we had longer, because I think it's such a fascinating debate, and I do think it's quite disempowering when we say that obesity is not a choice. It is complicated and it is difficult. There's no doubt about it, particularly in a society where we have food adverts thrown at us the whole time. But just one very quick question to you, Professor, if I may, before we go. It's never been more acceptable to be a bigger size. We've had a lot about body positivity. We see a lot in the media. So how is the discrimination, how is there more now than there used to be?
Well, it's the associations that we make with the stereotypes and the assumptions we make about people who are bigger, who are living with obesity. They're very negative. And I think it's those, we need to challenge ourselves, actually, our own attitudes and our own opinions, including myself, if we're going to make a change. They're so deeply ingrained and so entrenched that it's a constant kind of tension between our own unconscious beliefs in some instances and these positive images.
Yeah.
But we need to keep on discussing this so we can challenge ourselves.
Yeah,
actually.
It's really interesting. I wish we could keep on discussing it. Let's have this discussion again another day, but thank you very much both. I think it's a really important issue to raise awareness of.